today with Brett Swarts. Hey, Brett, how's it going?
Joseph, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, man, it's great to have you on the show. Brett's joining us from Sacramento, California, for all of you out there on the West Coast. Um, it's actually, I'm not sure what the weather is out there, but we had our little cold front. It appears to be over because now we are back in jeans and you have to wear a long sleeve shirt. It's a little bit chilly, but how is the weather out there?
It's perfect. It's like we call it the tax capital of the world out here. And, that means because of high taxes, you always have typically pretty good weather. So it's about 60 and perfect.
That's some pretty fuzzy math. I'm not sure what kind of science that is with taxes and weather, but I'll take it. So anyway, so for those of you who don't know, Brett Swarts is considered one of the most well-rounded capital gains tax deferral experts and informative speaker in the U.S. He is the founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions, an exclusive deferred sales trust trustee, host of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, and an EXP commercial multi-unit broker in Sacramento, California. His experience includes numerous deferral sales tax trusts, Delaware statutory trust, 1031 exchanges, and 300 million in closed commercial real estate brokerages and deferred sales trust transactions. He is an active commercial real estate broker and investor with brokerage experience and ownership in multifamily, senior housing, retail, medical office, and mixed-use properties. And he's a licensed commercial real estate broker who has held a Series 22 and 63 license. Brett, with all that being said, can you give our listeners a little bit more about your background and what you're focused on now? I know I stumbled through some of that bio because it is certainly a tongue twister with some of this stuff and super technical, but if you would, add some more color to that.
Absolutely. I grew up and fell in love with real estate at a young age with my mom and dad. They were in the real estate business, building and buying and owning properties, rentals in the Bay Area. We called it the MC Hammer. 1980s days, my brother and I would be hammering nails, driving bobcats, putting up drywall, and seeing a project start from zero to completion. And as well, a lot of change in technology, a lot of change in tax and investments over the years. Fast forward, I went to college, played some college basketball, which was pretty cool on scholarship, and took an internship at a place called Marcus and Millichap, where I learned how
I've
to
heard of those
underwrite
guys.
multifamily properties and 1031 exchanges, negotiate, and fell in love with everything finance and solving problems when it came to multifamily, especially value add and ownership and everything that's involved there. 2008 hit, and all of a sudden we went from making a little bit of money to like nothing overnight. It was a mess for ourselves and for a lot of our clients who had overpaid for the 1031 exchange. And that's where we found something really unique called the Deferred Sales Trust. And we think it's revolutionized the industry, and most people don't know about it. And that began my journey of helping people understand this. Clients close deals when they want to, defer cryptocurrency gains, stock, gains, real estate, save, heal, 1031 exchanges, GP interest, and all of the above. And so now I just coach and teach people on how to do this.
Very cool, man. So, and as we know, it's not really about how much you make, but how much you keep. And really all of your work is around keeping all those returns you make. I think it's very important for listeners to be aware that those returns that are presented to you are all pre-tax. Like there's this, they're not really in factoring in what your tax consequence may be if you do a 1031 or don't do a 1031, et cetera, because everybody's situation is unique. Some may do it, some may not do it. But so you mentioned earlier about, you switched from 1031s to these deferred sales trusts because you said 1031s were more expensive.
Not more expensive. They're actually cheaper. They're only about $1,000 to set up and go with. But they are more expensive if you overpay for properties and you lose half or everything during the crash, right? And have too much debt, not enough liquidity, not enough diversification. And that was really the financial crash where a lot of our clients knew in 05, 06, 07, they were overpaying, but they felt trapped by the 30 to 50% in capital gains tax and depreciation recapture. If they would have not traded, right, and executed the deferred on a 1031. And so that's where it can cost you. And that's really the key. Our parents taught us to sell high and buy low, not sell high and buy higher 180 days later in a shotgun wedding on a property that doesn't have the forced appreciation, doesn't have the true value add, not a deal that you may buy if it wasn't for the tax. And that's where we got to be really careful, especially right now with cap rates so compressed, so low, cash on cash so low, interest rates all time low. And a lot of the juice has been squeezed out a lot of these deals. And so seeing that and going through that is a lot of similarities that was happening right now that happened in the 05, 06, 07 run up. A lot of things are very different as well. But at the end of the day, we customize our plan for our clients. And I'll give you a couple of deal stories. We have clients that sold a $20 million multifamily property about your age, Joseph, in Las Vegas. And they're two GP partners. And guess what? They have a bunch of LPs and they don't want to pay capital gains tax on their GP positions. And they're not going to be doing a 1031 exchange. They never do 1031 exchanges for a number of reasons. But they called us and said, we don't want to pay tax. We've been paying tax on all of our deals. They've done over, 2,000 units at least now. And they said, can we defer? And the answer is yeah. And then the LPs have to go, no. Then they go, great, let's do it on another one. So they did it on a $16 million deal in Phoenix, another two GP positions. They did it again. They did it on a third one as well. And then they invested those funds tax deferred into a multifamily syndication in Dallas. And then another passive deal with another partner. And so it's all about figuring out ways to defer the capital gains tax, keep more of that wealth, and realizing that the 1031 only works for investment real estate. Typically has to be the whole entity must move, equal or greater value, 45-day identification, 180 a day closing. And that was what we call the blockbuster way of doing things. So it's not that we don't do 1031 still with clients. It's just that we found that in today's marketplace, it's the odds of you finding a deal within that 45, 180 and following all of those other little check boxes are just more difficult. And so why not have something like the Deferred Sales Trust, which you have no timing restrictions. So there's no 45, 180. There's no debt requirement replacement. Entities can go their separate ways. Partnerships can separate. It also works for businesses in cryptocurrency and primary home. We just did a $2.6 million business sale in Alabama, and he deferred $600,000 of tax, and he's building 70 multifamily units tax deferred, ground up development, okay? All tax deferred using the trust. And so the 1031, that's not even possible because it has to be equal or greater value. So it just understanding those nuances. Why is 1031 Blockbuster? Why is the Deferred Sales Trust Netflix? And then figuring out which tool is going to work for you. So I'll pause there, see if you have any questions or thoughts, Joseph.
Yeah, a couple. So I want to go back to the example you gave. And you mentioned, so this was on this Las Vegas deal, the two GPs opted to do the 1031 for themselves, but they didn't do the 1031 with the whole investment group. Is that correct?
Pause. They could not do a 1031 because the whole entity must move, right? And so they've never done 1031 exchanges with their positions and with all of their partners for a number of reasons. But the biggest one being typically all of the partners must agree to it. Plus, they're selling a $20 million asset. And guess what? When you're jumping up into and they bought it, I think, for 14, right? 14 or 15. And so when you get, the higher you get, the more competitive it gets with institutions as well, right? It's even more challenging and these cap rates are compressed. So it's a number of reasons why they don't like to go much above 20. They like to buy in that 8 to 10 to 12 to $14 million range, right? So they don't get as much competition on that 20 to 30 to 40. Now they like to bring it to 20, sell it to the institution and be out of there. But they had no 1031 option for their structure, but they had the Deferred Sales Trust option. So all of the LPs just paid their tax, and part of it is because our minimum is $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain. Had their LPs had that, they could still do their own Deferred Sales Trust. Part of how the Deferred Sales Trust works is each individual family, a married couple, has their own Deferred Sales Trust, right? And then the other LPs could have theirs too. Those are so small, so they just paid their tax, but the GPs were going to pay it, and they're like, wow, we can save 30, 40%. Let's defer it. Let's compile that amount of money there. Let's do another one, compile it on top of that. Let's do another one, compile it. Now you have a bigger pie to go put into another deal.
Yeah. No, we're actually doing a 1031 right now. We're doing a 1031 on two deals. One's like 14 million exit. The other one's 11 million exit. And we've got probably like 60 investors total on them, on both combined. And we are doing a 1031, bringing them. Some are opting to drop out. I think it's called like a drop and swap. And then, but we are going forward. So we've kind of like partitioned it So there's a group that's going forward, the group that's dropping out, and I want to say there's like a third group that's doing something else. Um, but man, talk about a ton of documents. I think just on one deal, I had like 30 freaking documents that they're doing for this 1031. And I've done some pretty complicated closings, and I was impressed by how many documents are involved in a 1031. Everything has to be, you know, you got to dot all your I's, cross your T's, like super perfect, because it's, you know, I mean, this is very technical stuff here. So anyway, that's just my experience. I was curious. I mean, I am aware though that as you mentioned, the deferred sales trust has a higher kind of threshold of total amount, I believe, to get into that. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, not to say that you can't pull that off, right? There have been drops and swaps. In California, those have been challenged, and those are, you know, I think you're in Texas, right? So
Yeah.
it may be a little more lenient there.
So
But
it's state specific, these
it
1031
it can
rules.
be, yeah. And so it can be. Although 1031 exchange is a national law, right? It's a U.S.
Right.
based law. Um, it's just be aware of those things. I know that for California residents who have been doing some of those drops and swaps, those can be failed. They could call them failed or something along those lines. So just be aware of that. But yeah, there are ways to still do 1031s, and most investors don't want to pay their tax, and so they're willing to do the 1031. And if you can find a deal that makes sense, you know, for your investor base, then hey, and we always say go 1031 first if you can find that. Right?
Yeah.
That's simple. You're maintaining ownership. It's tried and true. You've already done it. Our company is called Capital Gains Tax Solutions, you know, plural, because there's Delaware Statutory Trust, there's 1031 exchanges, there's the Deferred Sales Trust, there's Charitable Remainder Trust, there's Opportunity Zones. There's all these different things. The question is, what's best for you, right? And individual clients, it's a little bit different depending on their age, depending on, you know, where they're at in their lifestyle.
Yeah.
Or like I said, there are a huge amount of assets that don't even qualify for 1031, like cryptocurrency. We just did a $5 million cryptocurrency sale for a former Google employee who had $50,000 of Bitcoin that turned to 50 million.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And so she never sold any Bitcoin, but she exited 5 million into the Deferred Sales Trust in order to defer the tax, but also do a startup company. She can also go buy real estate with that money, all tax deferred. You can't 1031 Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
It also works for public stock and private stock. It also works for business sales. You can't 1031 any of those. Primary homes. We did an $8.3 million primary home. And so the question is, what solution actually fits for what you're trying to do? And then the next thing becomes a new depreciation schedule, right? Part of the reasons of owning multifamily is 27 and a half years of depreciation, of which you can cost seg and accelerate that, right? But eventually your depreciation goes to zero. Also, when you do a 1031, your old depreciation schedule travels. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's very important. A lot of people, you know, people know you pay capital gains. I feel like everybody knows you pay your capital gains. But what people also forget is that you also pay 25% on your depreciation recapture. So if you took $1 million in losses that year, you're going to pay 25% of that in tax recapture if you sell, unless you do like a 1031 or one of these deferred sales trusts. Is that correct?
You got it. And as long as your mortgage is not above your basis, there's a little nuances here that you want to make sure you're looking at. But the cool thing about the deferred sales trust, like back to the Alabama client, he sold for 2.6 million, deferred the tax. Well, he's building a brand new development. He didn't
Yeah.
1031. So guess what? He's getting a new depreciation schedule.
Yeah.
So that's a powerful way to
Which
get.
I was curious about how that works as well, because when do you set the value of that building? Because when you buy it, it's just dirt, and you start building it, and then you got your cost, and then you stabilize it. And I guess is that at the point when he refinances that they then kind of set the value for the depreciation schedule?
Yeah, good question. Since land can't be depreciated, right? It's the cost of the improvements.
Right.
And so as you're making those improvements, you're gonna be able to expense that and depreciate that. You'd have to work out that out with your individual CPA, and I think also different states might be a little bit different there as well. But most of what I don't even know really actually what point that would be. You know, so let's say you build 70 units, and then the value is, you know, X millions, right? And so is the tax, you know, is the tax basis there or assessed value? Then you can reverse it. and take 80% of it
Yeah.
as the value. Yeah, I think that would be more like the CPA type of question there, but it's one that is a good question.
Very cool. Yeah. So, one of the things that you brought up was um, the challenge with 1031 is great on the smaller properties, 10, 20, 30 million dollars, because there's a lot of properties that are above that. But for example, like we're doing two 1031s from smaller properties, a 14 and an $11 million deal. And that's going into a $65 million deal. And the estimated exit of that deal is $90 million. So we would have to, if we were to do a 1031 again, we would have to find something that's 90 million or greater. Is that correct?
Exactly. Equal or greater value, right? And equal or greater debt is typically the two rules, right? So
Yeah.
so it's both factors. Don't forget about that debt piece, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to be taking on X amount of debt in certain highly appreciated markets? And again, if the property has opportunity to grow the rents, it's growing, right? And it's value add, and you have that, that's great. That's part of why I don't like the Delawares as much, right? And I've done Delawares is because they're typically really turnkey, institutional type of operators, huge fees, but there's not a lot of value add. And so you're selling high and you're buying higher 180 days later, and you have no control, no liquidity, no diversification. And you go, well, don't you want to get your powder dry? And that was what happened in 2006. And this is why I started the company, by the way. A gentleman in Minnesota, this guy hates the stock market. He's amazing commercial real estate. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. And he's selling a $20 million asset in Minnesota, and he's looking around for 1031s. He's going, none of this makes any sense for these values. He goes, I think something's going to happen. He didn't know it was going to be '08 crash, but he played the Monday morning quarterback. He goes, I'm going to use this deferred sales trust for the first time. I'm going to give this thing a shot. I've only ever done 1031 exchanges, but I'm either going to pay my tax or do the deferred sales trust. Hey, I might as well give the deferred sales trust a shot. So he parks it in diversified liquid investment grade securities. Okay, not subject to the huge crash, which you can do that, by the way. You can protect it, get your powder dry, and he waited. And 5 years later, the bank calls him up and says, hey, that property you sold to that crazy 1031 California buyer? He's like, yeah. He goes, well, we just foreclosed on it, and we're just curious. Do you want to buy it back from us? He goes, well, maybe. What's the price? He goes, well, about 60 cents on the dollar from what you sold it to the other guy for. That's a pretty good deal. I think I'll take that deal. So he was able to reallocate the money that was in the trust that was sitting on the sidelines into this deal, all tax deferred. And that's where my brain exploded and said, what do you mean? That's 5 years later. That's not 180, 45. He sold high and he bought low. And once you understand that that's actually possible, right? And it's been done thousands of times, billions under management, over a dozen no change IRS audits. But guess what? Your 1031 broker doesn't want you to know about it. Most 1031 exchange companies don't want you to know about it. They want to keep you in that equal or greater value, chasing those deals, right? Perhaps overpaying. And so, we literally saved, I think, 5 or 6 1031 exchanges in the past 6 months alone. And one of the best saved stories was the deal in Georgia. It was a 126 unit apartment complex sale for $7.6 million. And we saved the failed 1031 exchange and helped him defer about $1.1 million of tax. But more than that, he got out of all of his debt. So he's debt free. He was diversified. He was liquid, and he's been investing in value add passive deals. Okay.
Right.
Slowly dollar cost averaging with proven operators. So it's not only great for the person who's exiting, but he's in his mid 60s. He's like, I don't need to do this anymore. I've been doing this for 40 years. Like, I've done hundreds of properties. Like, I don't need to chase. I like to just get out of debt, diversified, liquid, tax deferred, and let someone else help me, preserve the wealth. If that makes sense, Joseph.
Yeah. But as you mentioned in the beginning, though, this is a little bit higher threshold to get into. I think you got like $1 million of. So if an individual investor, an individual limited partner or LP were on a deal, and that deal was exiting or selling, and they wanted to do a deferred sales trust, they would have to, the total value of their investment would have to be $1 million, or
exactly.
Help me out here.
So basically we have a threshold of a $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain per transaction, unless you have 2 or more at 500, or basically 2 at 500. Okay.
Right.
So if you have two GP positions at 500, an LP at 500 and a GP at 500, or cryptocurrency at 500 and then a real estate deal at 500, you can combine that into one trust. It's just not great for the one person, one off that has, a $200,000 gain here, $150,000 gain here, a $50,000 gain here. Because why? Because of the tax attorneys who are my business partners who do the transaction and the cost. So we just focus on home run deals for everybody. $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain. Okay, if you have that, great. Or two or more assets that equal that, or two or less assets that equal that. So really just two assets. Then you're good. But once you establish scale, so once you're above $1 million, right, and then it's like buying apartments, right? You want to buy 150 units versus 25 because
Right.
you can scale it, and so this is the same concept here.
So you mentioned cost earlier. So how do the two compare on a cost basis? So say it's the same. Say an LP had $1 million in a deal. Their position was $1 million, and they're trying to decide, should I do one or the other? How would they, if they're looking strictly at cost, I would say, because obviously there's advantages, there's numerous other advantages to doing one versus the other. But if it's strictly on a numbers basis, how would the cost kind of rack up?
Yeah, so let's break that down. So I call this secret number 3 to a deferred sales trust optimal timing wealth plan, which is this: how to make the deferred sales trust an investment rather than an expense. We talked about the first one, right? Which is, we're going to defer the capital gains tax, but a 1031 is going to do the same thing. We're going to defer the capital gains tax, right? The second one is the timing aspect, right? And so perhaps instead of, you selling a $14 million asset and buying a $20 million asset, you guys are able to, defer the tax and then buy that same $20 million asset for 18 in a year or two when the market shifts, right? So there's that opportunity cost of purchasing at a lower price, or even buying like 3 deals, over the next, 18 months or 24 months at $5 million each, right? And so looking at that, you can still buy the assets, just smaller deals. You're not having to put all your eggs in one basket and overpaying potentially, right? So there's that potential of cost. The next cost was what I talked about. If you're an active investor, if you're a GP, you can get that depreciation new schedule. So you want to consider that comparison. The next one, though, it's kind of hidden, and it's interesting. It's the income tax deferral. So I'll give you an example. We had a client, there were 25 million, and they were selling a $5 million multifamily property in Colorado. And so part of what they were deferring is not only the capital gains tax, but they're also very high income earners. They live in California, right? They delayed the income from the trust. So it's kind of like an IRA, kind of like a 401k. And that for the trust, you don't necessarily have to take payments right away, right? And so their income is high, and this asset was paying them. They had no depreciation left, so it was all just taxable. Now they just transferred that $5 million into the trust. Now it's sitting in the trust, kind of like an IRA, and all of the interest that it's earning, typically 8%, okay, net of fees. Not a guarantee, not a promise. We got to go make the money, right, over a 10-year period of time. Is compounding, and it's building up inside of that, just like an IRA or a 401k. So what does that do to their income tax? It goes down, okay? So that's the beauty of this. It's income tax deferral, capital gains tax deferral, and then the biggest kept secret on this one, especially for ultra high net worth clients, if they're listening right now, and those who are worth more than 22 million married or 12 million single, it has to do with the estate tax. So anything above those thresholds, Joseph, are subject to 40% tax. Not going to be in the stepped up basis doesn't matter. The 1031 doesn't solve it. Okay, this is completely separate than the capital gains tax. It's the elephant in the room. The tiger by the tail is the capital gains tax. You got to get that under control. But the elephant that's just sitting there is this 40% death tax. So people have done a few things in the past. They've given a lot away to charity, which you certainly can do. You can buy a bunch of life insurance, which a lot of real estate folks, including myself, we don't like because it's expensive and it's not something that we like to really invest in that much.
Plus, depending on where you're at in your life, can be exactly very expensive. If you're in your 30s versus if you're 50s, 60s.
Yeah, I call those the blockbuster way of doing things. And charity is great, which is most of our clients are charitable. They're just not 100% charitable, right? And those charities may change, like their leadership may change, and you may believe in them now today, but then guess what? 10 or 20 years from now, the values can be completely shifted to new leadership that parents and mom and dad never wanted to support. So here's the solution. The Deferred Sales Trust 2.0 is what we call it. We moved all of the funds outside the taxable estate in one day without giving away to charity, without having to buy life insurance, okay, in which the kids maintain upon their passing the equity, right? And that's beautiful, right? So that's 40%. So on 5 million, immediately they had, by the way, they had all 25 million inside of their taxable estate. So that's the question to ask yourself. How much of this is inside of my taxable estate? Okay. And they're like in their, 60s. And how much of this is going to be in my taxable estate, and how much is it going to grow to? So on one deal on 5 million, immediately 2 million, we just eliminated 40% death tax because it's outside the taxable estate. 2, we lowered their income tax because they're not having to take income from the trust for a few years. 3, we deferred the capital gains tax, which is another 2 million. Okay. And so all of the cost of this is about 1.5% of the gross sales price on a one-time fee, and about 1.5, depending on the deal, on the AUM, but about 1.5 to 2% on a recurring fee, depending on how and where the funds are invested, and depending on how much is under management. Okay. And so for them, it's like, oh my gosh, this isn't even close. Also, too, they didn't want it 1031. Like for them, at least not right now, they didn't want to buy real estate. They didn't want to buy real estate right now. Now, in 3 or 4 or 5 years, they can get back into the game, right? I mean, they're smart enough. They've been through multiple cycles. They know when it's a good time to sell and a good time to buy. And so they say, let's just put it in the stock market, very conservative stuff. And they're not big stock market people either, by the way. So they're going to be hedged and protected, conservative, get their powder dry. So it's looking at it like a macro view and a strategy. And so that's how you make the deferred sales trust an investment rather than an expense. And a 1031, it's $1,000, and then you just trade and trade. And so to 1031 is cheaper on the onset, but the big picture, it could literally cost you millions of dollars because it's still inside the taxable estate. You're still getting taxed if you have no depreciation left, right? And you potentially overpaid for a property. So to us, the 1031 is actually really more expensive. But if you want to just count pennies and be like, 1,000 versus, oh my gosh, 1.5 to set up and about 1.5 to 2% ongoing, like, man, that's expensive. Well, not really. If we just deferred your income tax, deferred your capital gains tax, moved your funds outside your taxable estate, giving you a new depreciation schedule, also helped you diversify, right? Lower your risk. Well, the sleep well at night is also another thing to consider. If I have cryptocurrency, I did another deal for cryptocurrency owner out of Oakland, a couple. They Ethereum, and they bought it for about 100,000 and went to 13 million. Well, guess what? The husband is all about it. He's in the tech industry. He's like, this thing's going to go to 30 million, whatever. The wife is like, you know what? This is scary. Like, this represents the ability for us to exit this and be done. We never have to work again. They're working 60, 70-hour weeks, and they're in their mid-40s, right? Yeah. And so we sit down with them, and they're like, Brett, you're telling me that we can literally exit this right now and never have to work again? We can diversify it into real estate, to liquid investment grade securities, the biggest companies in the world, Netflix, Google, Apple, Home Depot. We can buy our own real estate deals. Yeah. We can do insurance if we wanted to. Yep. Hard money lending. Yep. Ground up development. Yep. At any time. Yeah. We can just sit in the bank and be patient. Yeah. And so once you understand that transformation that it provides for families, that's how it becomes the Netflix way of exit planning versus Blockbuster, Joseph.
Very cool, man. So I get the flexibility of it. I do think, my view of it is kind of the 1031 is it's kind of how you get your start. As you're doing these smaller deals, you might go into that, but as your wealth accumulates and as you get your net worth and the size of your investments grow, so must your tax planning and your tax ways of doing your tax planning. So, because right now we're doing this. Granted, we're very fortunate in that we sold our deal and already found another deal to 1031 into. But basically, you're playing this very high stakes game of musical chairs with a 1031. Like, if you don't find another property within that 180 days max timeline, I think 45 and 45 plus, there's a possibility for extension. Anyway, within that timeline, if you don't get that next property, you're paying tax and all that, and you already paid the legal work for it. So. And is that what you mean by when you say you've saved some 1031s? Is that where kind of they've run out of time and they're like, oh crap, the buzzer's about to click 0. Brett, please save us. Yeah.
Let me tell you about the great thing about working with us with the Deferred Sales Trust. We don't charge you anything unless you do the deal, right? And so we're going to cheer you on. I'm a multifamily broker. I'm with a national worldwide brokerage firm, and we try to unlock deals, uncover deals, try to buy deals. And we're connected really well. So we're going to try to help you find deals. Like, that's great. Yeah. And if you find it, we're the first one to cheer you on. You don't owe us anything. Okay. But here's the key. You want to make sure you're working with us So you're working with accommodators that will accommodate both the Deferred Sales Trust and the Delaware Statutory Trust and the 1031 exchange. Okay, like I said, most accommodators don't want you to know about this. They want to keep you
Yeah.
in the 1031 game, which you can't blame them. That's their business, and they don't really know how to do this, right? I didn't know about it at Marcus and Millichap until 2009, right? And we thought we were the Navy SEALs of investment real estate. In fact, my manager at Marcus and Millichap brought in, who is my business partner and the co-founder of the Deferred Sales Trust, to speak on this. And I grew up a 49er fan, and he played for the 49ers, and he's a financial advisor, and he's brilliant. And he's going to be, by the way, in my book coming out, Building a Tax-Deferred Exit Strategy. He's like the first chapter there, second chapter. And
Cool.
what's really cool about once he taught me how to do this, this is what changed everything, right? And so that's the key. We can save a failed 1031 exchange if you're with us early enough and if you're working with professionals who know how to do this. And so, yes, we work with accommodators, okay? And no matter if it's past your 45-day, okay, and or your deals are falling apart, we can basically save it on day 46 or day 181. The key is to engage with us, get with us, connect with us, get everything connected. And again, if you close on your deal, you owe us zero, okay? So we want to be that backup plan or that primary plan at close of escrow. Let me also tell everyone too, remember, if you're selling anything but investment real estate, you do not qualify for a 1031. So if you're selling a primary home, a business, cryptocurrency, stock, artwork, collectibles, right? All of that is subject to having the Deferred Sales Trust set up prior to the funds being transferred and the buyer removing all contingencies. This is also why we work on a conditional basis. You don't owe us anything unless it closes. For any reason you change your mind, you don't owe us anything. So yeah, so hopefully that answers the question, Joseph.
Yeah, yeah. No, so it sounds like you guys are kind of like the Swiss Army knife of capital gains tax solutions. I mean, you do everything. And so a prospective client would come to you because they want to do something in that space. They want to do some sort of capital gains tax solution. They don't know if it's 1031, deferred sales tax, or any of the numerous other options you just mentioned. And part of that ongoing discussion and dialogue, you guys will determine, hey, this is the best route for you.
You
or
nailed
maybe
it,
this
right? Opportunity zones, 1031 exchanges, Delaware Statutory Trust, Deferred Sales Trust, Charitable Remainder Trust. We're gonna lay out the options and say, will you decide? And by the way, I've had clients do partial 1031s, partial Delawares, and then a partial Deferred Sales Trust. We just did a multifamily property out of Denver, 1.4 million. And she said, Brett, I love the Deferred Sales Trust. I'm still a little cautious, so I want to put a little bit into the Delaware. I'm like, no problem. So she put about 300,000 or 400,000 into the Delaware, and she put $1 million into the Deferred Sales Trust. In her mind, she could diversify the strategies. I was like, cool. You know, that we can work with that. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be and in both.
Yeah, very cool. The other thing I was going to mention, I lost my train of thought there for a second, but so on this, on the 1031 options for investors, where was I going with this? I had a question. I just lost it. Dang. So on these 1031s that you're helping the clients with, so you're doing the whole kit and caboodle, like you're just doing the whole thing. Is that, or because you mentioned you got a whole team behind you, and it sounds like you got to be very like specialized. And so at least my experience has been like there's people that specialize in this. And so I was just curious, you've got a guy who like, this all he does is 1031s, and this other guy, he does these, and you guys will lay out the options for him. Or is like one, or like, are people like experts in all of this? I don't know. I'm just curious if it's.
Yeah. So that's great. It's a great question. So the tax attorney, my business partner who created the Deferred Sales Trust, CPA tax attorney, we call him the Beethoven of tax. Like he's the smartest person I've ever met. He's brilliant. Okay. And he, former Arthur Anderson, and that's a big 5 accounting firm before the Enron days. Like he's brilliant, wow. brilliant. And he's the one who created, he's the one who's faced the IRS, which is also an important thing to ask everybody. Like whatever you're hearing it from me or whoever else is pitching a different tax deferral strategy, you want to make sure there's a couple things, that the person who actually created it has actually defended their actual clients, the Deferred Sales Trust clients, and that they actually have successful track record with the IRS, that it's been looked at. There's lifetime audit defense, which is also built into every deal. So he's an absolute expert because he's the creator of it, okay? And so that I call them the brain surgeons. My role is a third-party unrelated trustee, which every trust needs to have. And I'm kind of like the nurse or the, and I'm helping to do the ongoing care of the management of the trust. Okay. And
Right.
so, but I also check you in and take your pulse, check you in for surgery kind of thing. So they'll do the surgery. Okay. So that's that. So yeah, 1031 exchanges. I became an expert in that at Marcus and Millichap. I mean, we learned that about day 3, and I've closed over $100 million in mostly multifamily investment real estate. So I've known that for a very long time. And as far as opportunity zones, we work and connect with some of the best real estate syndicators and operators in the nation, right? Who are on the ground, who are putting those opportunity zones in place. Those are also challenging to find good quality ones that have already been gobbled up or closed out. But that's how we work that. So we're not doing our own opportunity zones. And then we also work with amazing groups, Joseph, that are multifamily syndicators as options for where the trust funds could be invested. That's the other part. That's pretty cool. So hopefully that answers the question. We don't really do charitable remainder trusts anymore because most people, once they see the DST is basically everything the charitable remainder has, except no charity is required, and then a ton of more flexibility on the investments. They just never choose that. The last one is a Delaware statutory trust. You have to be a securities professional in order to provide that. My business partner, who's the co-founder of the Deferred Sales Trust, he's a financial advisor, the one who played for the 49ers. He provides that Delaware. As well, we work with business professionals, M&A advisors, business brokers, commercial real estate agents, luxury realtors, financial advisors across the nation. So it's a team effort, and sometimes I'm like the offensive coordinator, Joseph, like calling the plays and getting everyone in order, right? Kind of like what a broker does in multifamily brokerage, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I remember what my original statement was. I don't know how I forgot this one, but so basically, because you're commenting on earlier about how basically these people, other people will say that 1031 is the only way to go. And it's kind of like the analogy of if you've got a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. And so if somebody does 1031s, that's all they do, then everything is a perfect case for 1031. But in somebody like your situation where you can do everything and you can be very surgical and be like, no, like these are the options we have before us. Each one has its pros and cons. You have that conversation with the client, and then together you guys choose the best one. That's what I was kind of getting at.
100%. Is exactly right, right? We're not here to be the principal. We're here to just to
Yeah.
be consultants and help to build the dream team and help you think in a way that perhaps you haven't thought it before and challenge the status quo of the old school 1031 mentality. You're right, where they just want to hammer the nail. In fact, at Marcus and Millichap, this is really funny. The manager who brought in my business partner to talk on the Deferred Sales Trust, we call it maybe the screwdriver or the Swiss Army knife, like you said before. He brought him in and he was all about it. And like we all sat there like, wow, this is something different. He was let go a couple of years later, part of the whole crash thing, which was really, really bad. He was there for 20 years and then they let him go. The new manager who came in, Joseph, told me to stop talking about the Deferred Sales Trust. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, why? Why do we stop talking about it? I'm like, A, I'm getting in front of a lot of people and helping people. B, it can solve a huge problem. D, are you seeing all the blood in the streets here? Like if people would have done the Deferred Sales Trust, like the Monday morning quarterback, you would have sold everything in 06, 07. You would have paid off all your debt. You would have deferred all your tax, and you would have sat in the bank probably, right? Or really conservative stuff. And just sat there for 2 or 3 years and then bought all of these properties at 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60% discounts, right? With the trust. That's the Monday morning quarterback, right? But I'm going. So if that's actually possible, to us as a fiduciary, as a professional, we have a obligation to go out and educate on the best strategies. Now you got to make sure they're proven. They're backed up by the IRS, right? You're not paying the CPA or tax attorney. That's okay. But you're working with professionals like us to help you with that. And I challenge all the business professionals out there, or even commercial real estate syndicators, like you want to buy from the mom and pops who are in their 60s or 70s, where the rents are low and they're very being generous with the tenants. They will not 1031. Most of them will not 1031. They will do a deferred sales trust, right? And that's what's really, really, we love that. Like we help people unlock deals because we become the key that unlocks it that they've been waiting for. So it helps you as a commercial real estate syndicator to buy that next deal, right? And then for them to exit that deal, or the professional, it's like in a Rubik's Cube, right? We all have our part to play here to make this thing congruent on different colors. And when we get handed something, it's all discombobulated. And we're here to help to just try to make it, congruent as possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I imagine as a syndicator that they probably prefer to have a whole bunch of deferred sales trusts in their deal because it makes tax planning and exiting a lot easier because they don't have to worry about, oh man, this guy's in here and he wants to, I don't want him to pay the capital gains tax. And so, it sounds like the ideal scenario would be to have a deal where the whole thing is deferred sales trust.
It could be. Again, everyone has some different
Yeah.
needs and different wants. Again, have that be an option. The other way to think about it too, we're working with some big syndicators, what I mentioned before the phone call, is instead of having, let's say, 50 to 200 clients that are 50,000 to 25 to 100,000 range,
Yeah.
like why not just go, and this I think is the best kept secret, and it's our number one focus of 2022. Why not find an NFT or a Bitcoin or Ethereum tens of millions millionaire? Like I'm working with a gentleman for $200 million in NFTs. He's 33 and he wants to buy self-storage facilities, multifamily, value add, and he wants to partner with people who know what they're doing. Why not find that one or that five or that 10 of that group who are bringing 1, 5, 10, 15, $20 million. And then you're right. Everyone can do a DST on the way out and then roll it back into the next deal. DST on the way out, roll it back on the next deal, or 1031 on that deal too. Like you can still do that as well. Versus a lot of the smaller amounts, right? That can be you can do twice as much work and can be really challenging. Not to say that you don't accept those smaller investors as well. That's fine. But if you want to scale and build, this is to us it's the one of the best ways to attract capital.
Absolutely. Great feedbacks, I guess, for the syndicators out there. So, but what if you're an LP? So if you're a limited partner in a deal, you're a passive investor, and the deal that you're in is exiting and they're not doing anything. You find out that the plan is just to, do whatever, just to exit, pay your tax. Is there anything that a passive investor can do?
Yes, if it's $1 million net proceeds or $1 million gain, or they have two LP positions at 500 or better, right? So we do deals at 900, 800, 700. Yes, and yes, right? And so come to us and we'll see if we can help you out. But again, if it's just 50,000 or 150,000, if it's your one deal that you have, like we've gone through this so many times that you look at it and we go, the numbers, I just wouldn't, it's a base hit, maybe a double, but we want home runs for everybody where no one's looking at fees and going like, oh my gosh, like why are we getting charged this? Like we did some smaller deals in the beginning, Joseph, one thing we learned. And at time, I remember telling like, there's one gal out of Palo Alto and her tax was like 167,000 and her deal was about 650 to 700. And I was like, I remember telling her like, if I'm in your shoes, like after the fees and stuff, like, I don't think you should do it. She's like, no, I really want to do it. I'm like, are you sure? Like, I go, I think it's a base hit, maybe a double, but it's not a home run. And no, I really want to do it. Okay. So she does the deal. And sure enough, a year into it, she's like, oh, maybe I should have paid the tax, with the fees and the stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we kind of told you, right? So that's where we set that parameter, right? To be bigger because we want it to be a home run. So yes, they can still do it. Here's the key. They got to get with us early. They got to connect us with the GP. You need to communicate. You don't want to throw this on your GP 1 week before closing, right? So the key is pre-plan your exit plan now. So if you're hearing this right now, you're like, oh, I'm not selling for 2 or 3 years. That's okay. Connect us with them and tell them this is your intent, right? Look, you got a 500, 700, $1 million LP position, and you're going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax. We like to see about 250 to 300 as the liability number, right? And it's under 1 or 2 deals, right? That's $1 million or better that you're going to be doing in the next short period of time. That's when you want to connect with us.
So just to recap that, so if you're an LP in a deal and you're exiting and you're looking at a $250,000 to $300,000 tax, and their investments over close to the $1 million range, then you're saying this is an ideal situation for them. It's
a home run. Like it's an absolute no-brainer, right? Unless you tell me, Joseph, I want to go buy a boat in my house and I want to go live off the money. Well, we can't do that. To be tax deferred, it needs to be business purpose or investment purpose, right? But if you say, Brett, I'm not planning on spending it all on myself. I was going to invest it anyways into this next LP deal with Joseph or into the stock market anyways, right? Yeah, then why would you pay the tax?
And what is the GP's involvement on the deal?
So the GP doesn't have to do it, right? This is the cool thing. So we just assign the interest of the LP. A lot of these LPs, they're coming in as LLCs or individuals, but it doesn't affect the rest of the people. So it doesn't force anyone to do the deferred sales trust. All you're saying is please cooperate with this deferred sales trust that's been made for my family. It's estate planning. Assign the interest into the trust. The trust is actually what's happening, just so your listeners are probably wondering too, like how does this thing all work? they're going to carry back paper. So let's just say your position is $1 million, Joseph, right? And this LP position that started out at 250, okay, and it turned into $1 million. So
That's
it's
a
pretty
great deal.
yeah, it's a great deal, and it took how many years, right? You're like, sweet. I want to defer it. You can assign your $1 million to the trust in exchange for a promissory note. So you're taking your ownership hat off and you're becoming the lender. So you've lent the money to the trust, but it's like a simultaneous close right before it closes to the ultimate $1 million buyer. The trust ends up with all the funds. The trust establishes a new basis, $1 million, because it bought it from you for $1 million, sold it for $1 million, and the buyer takes title the same way they would have. They're gone. The million's left in the trust, and you're going to get paid back that million slowly and slowly pay tax, okay? That's how this whole thing works. It's IRC 453. It's a seller carryback. This is why it's not a 1031 exchange, because that's IRC 1031. That's just a continuity strategy where you're just trading ownership for ownership, right? Equal or greater value, 45,180. This scenario, you're becoming the lender, and that's what opens the blue ocean up. It's known as a seller carryback, the blue ocean of timing and flexibility.
So you said it's payback slowly. Is there a timeline for that?
Yeah, it's typically 10 years, and there's a promise as a balloon payment due at 10 years. Most of our clients live off interest-only payments, but they can take as much as they want along the way and just pay tax on that. But most of them won't dip into the principal of that million. They'll just live off interest payments. Let's say it's 8% compounding net of the fees. So we're going to try to earn 9.5, 10. It doesn't have to do that, but that's what we've been able to achieve so far over any 10-year period of time. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. All these things you have to approve all the investments, but most will live off 5 to 6, 7% starting in year right away or year 2 or 3. Slowly receive it, pay tax, and then when the balloon payment's coming due, they can renew it for another 10 years. And then renew it for another 10 years. And they can pass it to their kids, and their kids can step into their shoes, not a stepped up basis, but they can continue to stay in that tax deferral state.
Incredible. So this, I guess this sounds like, to me, I mean, this is kind of the secret to all of the ultra high net worth. I mean, this is that advanced level tax planning that you see people do, and you wonder, like, how does this guy not pay tax, or how these have all these fortunes? And so this is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like from what you're saying, this is that next level of tax planning that people are doing, and this is how they, the wealthy, keep their wealth.
Yeah, that's partly definitely true. The other thing is your CPA already knows about a seller carryback. Joseph, you know about a seller carryback where the seller can do financing. What you don't know is how to apply seller carryback law 453 with this deferred sales trust that's proprietary. Yeah. Right? And realize that you didn't know about a 1031 exchange 20 years ago, right? I mean, we were both pretty young at that point anyways, but even when we first learned about it, it took a while for us to understand the 1031.
Right.
There's 5,000 1031 companies. Okay. Wow. They have lobbyists and you know, there's one law firm. Okay. One law firm that does this. Now we work with national law firms that partner with it, but there's one for 25 years that's been doing it. And so it's not that it's new to people, and it's new to your CPA, partly because the education is not out there and they're not seeing it tangibly done. And that's why we're closing about a deal a week now, right? It's just like clockwork. We just did a dentist deal for a dentist out of New Jersey. And it was a $1.4 million deal. And these are mom and pops. They're about to pay $600,000 of tax. And so, I mean, this is their entire retirement, right? Yeah. And they're not sophisticated, high level, ultra high net worth, fancy people. They're just hardworking dentists for 30 years. And that changes their family tree in their life, right? They don't have a 1031 option. They have a deferred sales trust option, right? And that's pretty amazing.
So earlier in the year, I remember when they were talking about some changes to the tax code. 1031 was proposed as possibly on the chopping block. And so is any of this, you think, susceptible to future tax changes, et cetera?
Great question. So first of all, the Biden is proposing a number of things. A couple of them, by the way, that are looking like it's likely to actually happen is one, it's going from 20% federal to potentially 25, 26, 28. Okay, we're not sure how that's going to shake out, but that means increasing the capital gains tax rate federal. California, for example, is 13.3. Then you have Obamacare about 3.8%. This is how we get to that 30 to 50% when you add on depreciation recapture. So people are wondering, how do you get that number? I thought it was only 10 or 15. No. Once you go above a certain amount, you're going to jump into another bracket, and that's when these things all start adding up, okay? So just be aware of that. Now, one of the other things that was proposed was the 1031 exchange being taken away. It looks like that is off the table, right? Which is good news for all of us who love commercial real estate and ways to grow wealth, so we're happy that happened. However, the deferred sales trust is a completely separate tax code that we don't believe. We actually think there's a really good argument and why part of the audits have gone through. One, because it's 100% legal, but two, we think it's actually the IRS. It's in their best interest and the government to incentivize all of us to sell high and diversify, right? And we'll give you a case in point, and this is why we don't think it's going to be on the chopping block, and it's not even on their radar as far as we know. Because think about it, like let's do the Bitcoin scenario, right, Joseph? Does the U.S. government benefit that somebody has that worked for Google has $50 million in Bitcoin? Probably not, right? It's just sitting there. Like she bought it for $50,000. Now, Deferred Sales Trust comes along and she exits $5 million. She's going to exit another 1.3 here coming up as well. And that money goes into the stock market, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. The other amount goes into a startup business where she's creating jobs, U.S. jobs. Okay, tax revenue. I'm paying taxes on my fees. She's paying taxes on the revenue that's coming off, right? To us, that's great versus maybe Bitcoin going, Bitcoin's not likely, but the other ones could go to zero pretty fast or half the value. So what's happening is we're helping the IRS by using the tax code system to incentivize that taxpayer to not only transfer out and diversify and lower the risk of the investment, but also create tax revenue right now. Right? Part of what she said is I would never. Yeah, go ahead.
Because they have that 10-year horizon, right? So like there's a clock ticking and you're paying, it costs money every year to keep this thing going. So you're incentivized every year to move the money, make an investment, do something.
You nailed it, right? It's study of macroeconomics. The government, the same reason they do 1031 exchanges, right? If I had to pay tax on every single sale, this is why we believe it's staying, because they're looking at it and going, you're right. Like Joseph's not selling his $14 million deal if he's got to have to pay, 3, 4, 5 million of tax, unless he can 1031 exchange and create more jobs and more value and build and help communities with housing, right? So all these things are interconnected. The government's in the business of incentivizing us to do things that they can't do efficiently. And the deferred sales trust is another way. It's also why they have IRAs and 401ks. They're not in the business of managing us, Joseph, when we're 60 and 70 and 80 and retired. They say, hey, let's incentivize Joseph and Brett and everyone else that's a U.S. citizen to invest into a 401k or an IRA so that they can defer some tax and so that they can retire comfortably, right? So we're not on a crisis here to have to take care of everybody. So it's the same thing with the deferred sales trust, and it's just applies to highly appreciated real estate and cryptocurrency and businesses.
Yeah, I saw that the IRA they're looking at making some changes to that too, because there'd been some people who had grown some pretty incredible balances within their IRA, and that raised some alarms. The challenge with those, though, as you know, is it's tough to get a big enough investment. I mean, you can only put in so much per year, and there's ways around that through structuring and whatnot, and having, one of the keys I remember was that there's a limit to how much you can contribute to an IRA, but there's no limit on how much profit an IRA can receive. And so with that kind of concept, that's how some of these ultra wealthy and business startups are able to grow pretty large balances and the IRA. But anyway, I think that's coming to an end anyway, because it sounds like they're capping that at 10 million within an IRA. So I don't know, is there a cap? I imagine not with the deferred sales trust.
Nope. The biggest deal is a $125 million deal in San Diego, California. That was audited, by the way. No change on that audit. Successful, perfect track record. We're hoping to do the first $1 billion crypto NFT deal, in the next couple of years. I'm working on a $200 million NFT deal right now. I've already closed a $5 million Ethereum, $5 million Bitcoin, another $2.5 million Ethereum. And so we're going to do NFTs and all kinds of other stuff. So yeah, that's the goal here.
Man, it's crazy stuff. Well, this is awesome, man. Well, hey, it's been great speaking with you. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with? Or actually, no, before we go, I did want to mention, you talked about your book earlier. And I just want to remind everybody about this book to go check it out. I think it's called Building a Tax Deferred Tax Strategy. Is that correct?
Yeah, building a tax deferred exit strategy,
Exit
the
strategy.
proven playbook for unlocking your ideal wealth plan when selling assets of any kind for yourself or your clients. And
And
it's
where
pretty
can
cool.
they
We
find
got
it?
Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. He's in it. We have Neil Bawa. We have Joe Fairless. We have Dan Hanford. We have Kevin Bupp, Michael Blanc. We have a number of amazing people that are contributing. We have Buck Joffrey. And so, yeah, I mean, it'll be on Amazon. We're looking to release it here. We're recording this right now, January 13th. So we're looking to be released here in the next 30 days. And my publisher, is in control of that a little bit more. But yeah, Amazon will be probably the main place. And then our website, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. By the way, we also have a free mastermind you can join. It's basically Deferred Sales Trust University. We're talking about cryptocurrency, business sales, real estate. We're really heavy on crypto right now. You can join that. We have clients on there, CPAs, financial advisors, commercial real estate operators, syndicators, where we all brainstorm at 10 a.m. PST every Friday for about 30 to 40 minutes. You can also register by going to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com.
So if I were a tax person in some other city, maybe I did 1031s, I'm a CPA, whatever, I could join this school and I can learn more about it and becoming affiliated with you and help my clients.
Yes, exactly right. We want to train and coach 100,000 of the top 5% of all business professionals that are serving high net worth clients, including CPAs, tax professionals, commercial real estate syndicators, crypto influencers, experts, financial advisors in the next 10 years. That's our goal. And so, yes, everyone is welcome. Please join us, and we'd love to be able to strategically align with you.
All right, man. Well, that's great. Well, hey, brother, thanks again for coming on the show. It's great to speak with you. I learned a ton. I will definitely be in touch with you for once we exit this $65 million deal, we will be in touch. And anyway, brother, thanks again for coming on the show. It's good